Hey guys, welcome back to my annual video of weapons I would recommend to play or to try out in Battlefield 2042. So I'm gonna go over my personal top 3 for every category, but keep in mind that these are really my personal recommendations and they're not necessarily working for everyone or they're not necessarily perfect for everyone. And we're gonna start with the SMGs, and here my favorite is the PP29, the K30 and the PP2000. The PP29 is very versatile and that's why I really love it. You can play it on close range, you can play it on mid-range, and it's also a very reliable weapon. For my personal setup, I'm almost always using a holo sight, so either the Fusion or the DD, depends on what the weapon has, and then the tactical compensator for more weapon accuracy. On the underbarrel you can unfortunately not use anything because of the placement of the magazine, and then you have the magazine, and here I'm using the standard issue instead of the high power just because it has a higher rate of fire and the reload speed is a little bit faster, plus the recoil control as well. So I think that overall this benefits the weapon a bit more than the high power ammunition. Next up we have the K30, and here again DD holo and tactical compensator for the same reasons, weapon accuracy. Then I'm using the LS laser sight here because of the higher hipfire accuracy, because I'm just most of the time firing this weapon from the hip because it's just that close quarters hipfire monster that you can take to the trenches or to redacted and just spray and pray from the hip and you will always hit and kill something. So it's really useful here. But what I'm not using is the standard issue drum magazine. Instead, I prefer the high power extended magazine simply because I think with the high power ammunition the weapon feels a bit more impactful and it hits a bit harder. So especially when it gets on a little bit of range, I think this high power magazine is better even though it has a little bit less ammunition. And then for the PP2000, this is my absolute favorite when it comes to the SMGs. I don't know why actually, but I really love how it feels and how it plays. And here I'm using the reflex sight. It just gives me that old school feeling because this is a vault weapon, so it comes over from an old Battlefield game. And then the tactical compensator again for more weapon accuracy, which also benefits hipfire accuracy by the way. So I think it's overall beneficial. But if you want to be a bit more stealthy, you might want to go with the rep suppressor instead, or at least have it in your plus menu so you can switch to it if you need it. And then for the ammunition, there's only the standard issue available, so be sure to select the extended one so you have more rounds in your magazine. Moving on to the assault rifle category, here my favorite weapons are the M5A3, the SFAR, and the GEW. For the M5A3, I really like this weapon because it's so versatile and it's also the first one or one of the first ones you have access to, so it's perfect if you just started playing the game. And here my setup that I prefer is a close range setup, so the shortened barrel which increases the rate of fire, then the STNR laser sight which increases hipfire accuracy while moving and also increases the recoil control, and I'm also using the standard issue extended magazine instead of the close combat magazine. But this is for the same reasons as for the PP29, just because the standard issue is a bit more impactful and has a bit more of a punch compared to the close combat ones. So I think that this setup actually works pretty well, especially on close range, but also on a bit of mid-range or close to mid-range. If you want to go more mid to long range, I would recommend to use the extended barrel, BCG light grip, and high power, or maybe also the standard issue, but I think the high power works a little bit better here. And if you want to be stealthy, of course go with a suppressor. I prefer the rep suppressor here. Then for the SFAR, This is, I think, one of the most played weapon in Battlefield 2042, simply because it's so easy to control and it hits so hard. And I see a lot of new players playing it for a reason, of course, because it's just so good and it's so easy to play and it's so reliable. And I can also only recommend to try it out if you haven't done yet. And my personal setup for it is, again, a fusion holo, so I'm using holo sights on almost all of my weapons. Then the tactical compensator again, but I always have the wrapped suppressor as a backup just in case I want to be a bit stealthy. Then on the underbarrel you can only equip one of the launchers, and I would definitely recommend to go with an HE here, then with the AP or maybe the incendiary, and definitely with the smoke launcher, especially when you play as a medic. This really comes in handy. And for the magazine, I'm using the high power here instead of the normal standard issue, because I think the high power just works so well with this weapon, especially when you try to engage in combat on mid to long range. If you want to go a bit more long range, you can also equip the extended barrel, but I think this makes the weapon a little bit harder to control, and it also reduces your rate of fire. So I'm not really using it, but just as a backup, if you want to try it out on long range, maybe it works for you. But for me, this setup right here works a lot better. And then always one of my favorites is the GEW in the assault rifle category. I don't know why exactly, but it just feels like it actually works well for my playstyle and it feels so good for me to play. But here I'm also having a similar setup to the SMGs, so I'm using the tactical compensator because I really like this additional weapon accuracy, so I use it on almost all of my weapons. And then the SDNR laser again for more hipfire accuracy while moving, simply because I really like to fire this weapon from the hip on close range. But it also works really good with this laser on mid-range, even if you have to aim down sight. And then for the magazine, I'm using the standard issue, simply because I think it feels really good for these close to mid-range engagements. Again, if you want to go a bit more long range, try the extended barrel, but also here I feel like the tactical compensator works a lot better. Then the next category are the LMGs, and here we have quite a lot of weapons as well, same as for the assault and the SMGs. And here my favorites are the LCMG, the DFR Strife and the M240B. The LCMG is my absolute favorite LMG overall, simply because it's so good when you fire it from the hip, but also really good on mid-range engagements and to suppress the enemy, and to basically you can run and gun with it, but you can also focus your fire on mid-range on single enemies. But how I set it up, of course, because it is my beloved close-range weapon, is with a shortened barrel that increases your rate of fire, then with the STNR laser again for improved hipfire accuracy, and with the close combat ammunition also for an even higher rate of fire, a bit more recoil control, and also a faster reload speed. And this weapon in this setup is just so much fun to play, even on the smaller maps like Redacted or Stadium, so be sure to try it out. I can really only recommend to try it. Then for the DFR Strife, this is, I think, a weapon that not too many people are playing, at least I'm not seeing it much, but I think it's actually pretty good because it's so versatile. I use it again with a tactical compensator, this time with the LWG grip for more accuracy when moving, and I'm not using it with a laser because I don't want this specific hipfire accuracy, but I also want the aim down sights accuracy. And then for the ammunition, I'm using the standard issue, but here the belt fed. And I tried different versions with the belt fed and also with the extended, and I'm a bit torn with this. So sometimes I'm using the belt fed and sometimes I'm using the extended. It always depends on what feels better for the specific type of match and how the enemies are playing and how the match overall goes. So I can also recommend to try this extended because here the reload speed is a lot faster compared to the belt fed. What I can also recommend is to play this weapon in full stealth with the PB heavy suppressor and the subsonic, either in belt fed or in the normal magazine, so you can reload faster. And this is really good for these smaller maps or when you want to go on a flank or something on breakthrough. Don't underestimate this weapon. If you haven't tried it yet, be sure to try it out. I think you will really like it. And then as the last weapon for the LMGs, there's the M240B, also a weapon that is coming over from the vault. And this is a weapon that I slept on for quite some time, but it actually surprised me with its versatility, and especially that you can, with one single setup, you can fire it from the hip and just spray and pray and hit a lot of targets very precisely, but still go for those mid and long range shots, and it works just as well as it does when you fire it from the hip. So this is a really good weapon. If you haven't played it yet, I can also only recommend to try it out. Here again, I go with the tactical compensator. I think I have a bit of an obsession with this one. Then with the LWG grip, specifically with the grip here instead of the laser, because I prefer this accuracy when aiming down sights as well as when firing it from the hip, and not only the hip fire accuracy. And I also go with the standard issue extended. There is nothing to really choose here, so just go with the one that has the most ammunition. And then for the Marksman rifles, we have a little bit less weapons here, but I also go with 3 recommendations because I have 3 recommendations. And the first one is the DM7, then there's the BSVM, and the other one I forgot in between is the SVK. The DM7 is actually one of my favorite DMRs. It's also one that is available right from the start if you're a new player, so I would recommend to try this out if you just started playing, because I think it's really good and also very versatile. But I'm again using a setup that is made for more close range combat, simply because I like to play in more close range and like to engage with the enemy a lot. So again, tactical compensator, then the SDNR laser and the standard issue magazine. What you can do here as well for a bit more hard-hitting setup is go with the high power magazine, the BCG light grip, and either the extended barrel or the factory barrel. And I would also highly recommend to at least have a suppressor, the rep suppressor in my case, in the plus menu, because sometimes you want to be stealthy and you don't want to miss out on this stealth and on this reduced minimap stealth. You can also combine this with the subsonic ammunition, because this will give you even more minimap stealth. And then another one of my favorites is the SVK. I think I've played this one quite a lot already, because it's a pretty hard-hitting DMR that you can also play on close range if you know how. And it's actually pretty reliable if you got used to it. It takes a bit of time to get used to it, especially to its recoil pattern, which is pretty unique. But once you got used to it, it's really good, and I don't think you want to play anything else after this. So how I play it is with a shortened barrel, because it increases your rate of fire, and I think this really comes in handy on the SVK. Then I go with the BCG light grip for more accuracy when aiming down sights, simply because I barely fire this weapon right here from the hip, but instead I always try to aim down sight, which I think just works best for this weapon, because the hip fire is not really strong on this one compared to the DM7, for example. And then as a magazine, I have the standard issue in the extended version, because it increases the rate of fire compared to the high power ammunition, and it also has better recoil control, which I think also comes in handy on this weapon. Here again, I can recommend to actually go with the Ghost Hybrid, because you can switch it between 4 and 1.5, but you should also have this 2.5 thermal optic in your plus menu, simply because sometimes you have situations where you can't really see the enemy, and then this really comes in handy. And as a last weapon for the DMRs, there is the BSVM, and this is probably the most played DMR, simply because it hits hard like a DMR, but it plays a lot like an assault rifle, and you can switch it to full auto. But remember that this weapon starts in single fire when you spawn on the map or when you join a new server, so don't forget to switch it to full auto when you start your game. Otherwise you will stand in front of an enemy and hold the trigger, but you just do one single shot and then get killed. But at least then you remember that you forgot to switch it to full auto. My setup that I prefer on this weapon is the factory suppressor, suppressor instead of the shortened suppressor, because I think the factory suppressor is a little bit more balanced when it comes to engaging in combat in close to mid-range or even long range. Then I'm using the LWG grip, but if you prefer to use it as a more long-range weapon, I can also recommend the BCG Light here. And then as a magazine or as ammunition type, I prefer the subsonic high power in the extended version over the normal high power, simply because it gives you more minimap stealth, and I think that really comes in handy, and that's what this weapon is made for, because you always have this built-in suppressor in no matter what barrel attachment you actually choose. No matter if you go with the long, the short, or the factory, it will always act like a normal suppressor and give you minimap stealth at 30 plus meters. And in combination with the subsonic, you reduce this to, I believe it's 20 or 15 meters, but I can't remember because it was changed so many times. Now, moving on to the sniper rifles, here I will only give you 2 recommendations because we don't have that many rifles here. And the first one is the SWS-10, and then the second is the GOL Sniper Magnum. Now, you might be wondering why I prefer the SWS over the DXR, and the reason is pretty simple, because the SWS is more versatile and you can build it as a complete close range weapon with a laser or with a short barrel, but you can also build it in a more long range style with a long barrel and high power ammunition. And what it doesn't have compared to the DXR, and that's why I prefer the SWS, is this weird delay before you can fire again, because the rechambering speed is just faster on the SWS and you don't have this strange delay before you can fire it again. So my personal setup, like I already said or suggested, is the extended barrel for more projectile velocity, even though it loses a bit of rate of fire, but I don't mind this on this weapon. Then the BCG Light grip for a higher aim down sights accuracy, but instead of the high power ammunition, I go with the standard issue in the extended version for the higher ammo capacity and also for the faster reload speed compared to the high power ammunition. For the optics, I like to go with the Ghost Hybrid by default, because you can switch it from 4 to 1.5 like I said before, but as a backup I always like to have the 6x here, but remember that those have scope glint, so you will be seen once you aim down sight, you will be seen from distance by the enemies. And I also like to use the thermal 6x every now and again, especially on maps like snow maps where it's sometimes hard to see the enemy. But these thermals can be a bit strange because it feels like you have to aim at a different point compared to the normal 6x, because their crosshair doesn't seem to be perfectly aligned with the middle of your screen. So keep that in mind in case you're struggling with those. And then for the GOL Sniper Magnum, I think this is one of the best sniper rifles, actually the best sniper rifle that we had. At least it feels like it's really hard hitting, and I feel like I just hit more of my shots with it, but I don't know why. Unfortunately, we don't have too many attachments here, so you can only use the factory barrel, and here for the underbarrel you only have the choice between nothing or a bipod, and then for the magazines you only have the choice between the extended and the normal one, and of course you want to go with the extended here because you want to have more bullets in your magazine. For the optic, I prefer the 6x here by default, simply because I use this weapon more for mid to long range shots and never for close range, and as a backup I like to use either the 8x or the 12x here for the really long range. Sometimes you have these ranges, but I really barely use it, so maybe you're better off with a thermal on this one. And lastly, we have the tactical category, and here as well I only have 2 recommendations, or like 2.5, and that is the MCS 880, the 12M, and the half one is the Rorsch Mark IV, and I'm gonna explain why in a second. The MCS 880 is, I think, the best shotgun we have in Battlefield 2042. You can hit shots up to, I think, 20 meters that are definitely one shot, but it also depends on the buckshot you're using. But this is just so much fun to play, especially on the smaller maps like Stadium or Redacted. and it's a good shotgun if you prefer to play shotguns, let's put it like this. And I think it should be well known if you're coming from former Battlefield games. And here I like to play with a factory barrel and with a suppressor as backup, but I don't like to play the suppressor by default. So I really like to start out with a factory and then see how the match goes and see if I really need the suppressor. Then I like to use the laser sight because of course you want more hipfire accuracy on a shotgun because you will mostly fire it from the hip. And then I'm using the buckshot 01 because I feel like it has the most versatile pattern and it hits the most shot in sum or on average compared to the other ones. And then the 12 auto is, I think, one of the weapons where you can really make someone rage quit on the enemy team, because it just feels so great to run around unredacted and just spray and pray, and you know you will hit something. So you can just hold the trigger and run through enemy lines, and you can be sure you will get some messages after this in the chat. For my setup, I'm using the factory barrel instead of the shortened barrel. Then I'm using the laser sight because same as on the MCS, I want more hipfire accuracy on a weapon that I'm almost always firing from the hip. And here also the #1 buckshot as drum magazine and the other magazines as backup, because you can really run out of ammunition fast on this weapon, especially when you spray and pray. And then for the Rorsch Mark IV, because I said this is only like a half recommendation, because this is a weapon that I can recommend to try out, but it's not necessarily one that I think is really good or is one of the best weapons in the game or would be a weapon that I play a lot. It's not, but it's a weapon that is fun to play. It has its disadvantages because it has this weird delay before you can shoot every time, but when you hit with it, especially with the high power capacitor, which is basically your sniper capacitor, it really hits hard and you don't have any bullet drop on it. So this is a weapon that can be fun to play also when you use the stream capacitor, for example, but then again on close range this usually makes you lose more gunfights than you would win them, because every other weapon shoots faster than this one. So if you want to play it, I would recommend to use it with a high capacitor and play it like a sniper rifle. And as an optic, you can either go with the default one, or when you play it as a sniper, I would of course recommend to use a sniper optic. And just as I was about to wrap up this video, I realized that I forgot the secondary weapons, and maybe you want recommendations on those as well, so I'm gonna include them real quick, because here are my recommendations would be the G57, the PF51 and the BFP, or that's at least the weapons that I usually play as secondaries. The G57 of course, because you can switch it to burst fire, so don't forget to do this. You have to do this every time you join a new server, otherwise it will fire only in single fire. And here I'm using the tactical compensator again, the laser sight for more hip fire accuracy because I fire it much from the hip, and then you have the close combat drum magazine simply to have the highest rate of fire and the highest ammo capacity and the best recoil control. Then on the PF51, I really love this weapon because it feels like a good addition to a sniper rifle or to a DMR, because it's basically like a very fast firing small SMG that you can equip as a sidearm. And here I also go with a tactical compensator or maybe with a suppressor, depends on the situation, and also with a laser sight for more hipfire accuracy, because that's simply how you will play this weapon, and then with the standard issue or with the subsonic when I'm using the suppressor. And on the BFP, I think the Deagle should be well known as well. It's a hard-hitting weapon. You can even hit headshots on longer ranges with it and one-shot kill the enemy. So this is really worth it, maybe if you play with an assault rifle or with an SMG and you want a weapon that you can use as a small sniper in addition to this. So here you cannot change the barrel, so you have to stick to the factory barrel. On the factory mounts, you can go with the laser or with a flashlight. I'm not really using the laser here, but you can equip it just in case you fire it from the hip, which is something I'm not doing much, so I never really missed the laser sight. And here as a magazine, I'm using the high power simply because it hits harder and you have a higher effective range with it, which is what you want on this weapon. And that was it for today. These are my top 3 or top 2 recommendations in Battlefield 2042 for all categories. And tell me in the comments below what you think about them, or if you have your weapon that you would recommend and your setup that you would recommend, and maybe I would try it out and then recommend it in a future video. And if you enjoyed this video right here, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. I'm the Catwoman and you are awesome.